Hello and welcome guys to another episode of Are They Good? A series dedicated to discussing Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypes in regards to viability, combos and so on and so forth so that you don't have to. Last episode we discussed the water-based synchro deck Bergtai. However, in this episode we will be moving our attention to Sprigguns, a fire-based Xyz archetype that premiered in Blazing Vortex and will be receiving upcoming support in Lightning Overdrive. We will be formatting this video by first discussing the gimmick, the monsters, the combos, and finally concluding with the answer to the question of are they good or are they not? Every archetype in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is defined by their gimmick or theme, whether it be Beaver Warrior beatdown focusing upon beefing Beaver Warrior's attack to OTK, or Strikers focusing upon limiting the opponent to transition the game into an elongated grind game. Themes are an important part for the identity of an archetype. It is their very soul, and it is often at times the reason an individual may choose one deck over another. Sprigguns focuses upon Xyz summoning, but with an interesting twist. Unlike a lot of Xyz decks where they utilize two or more monsters of the same level to achieve the goal of Xyz summoning, Sprigguns cheats by producing the Xyz monster with a field spell, Vast Desert Golgonda, which allows him to special summon the Xyz monsters directly from the extra deck without materials. On top of this, each of their main monsters are able to attach themselves to the Xyz monsters from the graveyard to facilitate plays. Okay, so with the theme being discussed and out of the way, let's move on to the heart of the deck, the monsters. Sprigguns monsters can be divided into three categories: the level 4, the level 8s, and the Xyz. The main monsters all contain the same effect of being able to attach themselves from the hand or graveyard to the Xyz monsters. The Xyz all contain the effect to banish themselves during your opponent's main phase or battle phase until the end phase. The level 4s are the primary means of facilitating plays. They consist of Sprigguns Rocky, Sprigguns Brother, and Sprigguns Pede. Sprigguns Rocky has the ability to recoup any Sprigguns monster to hand or extra deck in the case of the Xyz, or recoup the field spell. Sprigguns Brothers has the effect to special summon a Sprigguns from grave when sent from hand or deck to the graveyard, and Sprigguns Pede tributes itself to special summon a Sprigguns from grave. Primarily you will utilize Brothers and Pede. Brothers combines well with Merrymaker as it allows you a free special summon off of Merrymaker's send effect, and Pede will be utilized as a follow-up to summon a Sprigguns from grave to allow for further Xyz plays. Rocky will mostly be utilized to recoup cards, but its effect is lackluster in the Sprigguns deck, as Sprigguns have almost no grinding game, making its effect rather useless, but not useless enough to be cut out entirely. You usually run one or two. The level 8 consists of Sprigguns Captain Sargus and Sprigguns Banger. Captain Sargus has the effect to detach a material from a Sprigguns Xyz to target it and destroy a card on the field. Additionally, while it is attached to a Sprigguns Xyz monster, that monster gains 500 attack. Sprigguns Banger allows the player to banish itself and another Sprigguns monster to search any Sprigguns card. You will primarily utilize Sargus by positioning it on board after summoning your Xyz, or attaching itself prior to ending your turn to boost your Sprigguns Xyz monster, which will primarily be X-Blower. You will utilize Sargus on-field effect during your opponent's turn as it is a quick effect. Banger will mostly be utilized as a searcher, either by being sent off of Merrymaker or Sprigguns Watch, setting up for Sprigguns Blast to have further interaction during the opponent's turn. The Xyz consists of Sprigguns Ship Explorer and Sprigguns Merrymaker. Explorer has the effect to target and choose a monster zone or spell or tap zone and destroy cards next to that zone or adjacent up to the number of Sprigguns monsters you decide to detach. Merrymaker allows the player to send a Sprigguns to the grave when it is summoned, and additionally, if you banish it at the end phase of that turn, if it had two materials on it, then you can send a fusion monster that listed Fallen of Albaz as material to the grave. You will primarily summon Explorer to destroy cards, but because it is not a quick effect, you will set him up turn 1 to act as a big body by attaching Captain Sargus, or use the effect to banish itself during the main phase or battle phase of your opponent's turn to avoid its destruction. Merrymaker will be used primarily to set up plays, and it will be one of the first Xyz you summon off a Vast Desert, or actually it will be The only exceed you summon over Vast Desert, as Vast Desert is once per turn. This is because it allows you to recoup cards that you discarded, which will usually be a Sprigguns monster, by sending brothers, allowing you to special summon that card you discarded, or sending bangers and garnering a generic Sprigguns search. The second effect doesn't really come up that much, the effect to send a fusion to grave, but it does help because you can send cards such as Splint, the Steel Express Dragon, which is not a Sprigguns card by the way. You can send that card to the grave and you can add or special summon a Sprigguns monster, or Fallen of Albaz. Now obviously you can utilize this effect to send tons of other Fallen of Albaz fusion monsters, but because not a lot of those monsters have much interaction or synergy with Sprigguns, you may not choose to run them in the extra deck, as your extra deck may be a little bit tight. And that's all for the monsters allowed. Let's move on to the spells. Spells are often utilized as starters, searchers or playmakers, and traps are usually utilized as interruption. Sprigguns is no different. Sprigguns spells consist of Sprigguns Watch, Sprigguns Booty, and Vast Desert Golgonda. The traps consist of Sprigguns Blast and Sprigguns Call. Sprigguns Watch allows you to search the field spell Vast Desert Golgonda, or if the field spell is on board, one can utilize Sprigguns Watch to send a Sprigguns monster to grave and subsequently add a Sprigguns monster from deck to hand. Sprigguns Booty is a continuous spell that allows you to send it to the grave to activate Vast Desert from deck, and if a Sprigguns Exe's monster leaves the field by card effect, you can choose one effect monster your opponent controls to disallow any player from activating that monster's effect. It's important to know that it doesn't negate the effect, it only stops your opponent from activating the effect as a whole, so it will not negate continuous effects. Vast Desert Golgonda allows you to discard a Sprigguns card to special summon a Sprigguns Exe's monster from the extra deck. It also allows all your Sprigguns Exe's monsters to gain 1000 attack, and if an Exe's monster leaves the field, you can target one monster your opponent controls and that monster cannot attack for the rest of the turn. The traps consist of Sprigguns Blast and Sprigguns Call. Sprigguns Blast allows you to choose a monster zone or two if you have a fusion that lists Fallen of Albaz and your opponent cannot special summon or normal summon in that zone, and if a monster is in that zone during activation, the monster cannot attack or its effect is negated. Sprigguns Call allows you to special summon a Sprigguns monster or Fallen of Albaz. If it's in the graveyard except the turn it is sent, you can banish it and one fusion monster to attach a fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz to that Exe's monster from the extra deck. The spells are the most important. The field spell Vast Desert Golgonda will primarily be utilized to make Merrymaker unless you are comfortable making Merrymaker with 2 level 4s. However, you will primarily utilize Vast Desert to summon Merrymaker to send a Sprigguns monster to grave. The attack boost and not allowing your opponent to attack with one monster allows you to annoy your opponent further. Boosting Explode to 2600 attack is pretty impressive, and boosting Merrymaker to 1600 isn't that impressive, but it ensures your opponent cannot just poke with a weak leveled monster. It is important to note that if you use Captain Sagas, this monster will be boosted further, with Explode going up to 3.1k and Merrymaker going up to 2.1k, making Merrymaker bearable and making Explode powerful. The continuous spell Sprigguns Booty will be utilized in conjunction with your Exes, banishing themselves to negate your opponent's effect. It is wise and important to banish the Exe's monster during the normal summon or activation of hand effects of your opponent. So, for instance, if your opponent was to summon Dogmatic Saint, either by special summon or normal summon, it is important to chain one of the Exe's Sprigguns monster to that activation, because in the following chain you can negate that monster with Booty, so you can negate Saint in the following chain if your opponent tries to activate Saint's summon effect. So it's important to always note these kind of things. You can't just activate an Exes and then automatically use Booty. You have to use Booty as the card in the second chain. If that's confusing, I may try to elaborate it more in the comments if you ask down below. Watch will be utilized either a searcher for Vast, but you should always aim to send and search a Sprigguns monster. It is more worth to send Booty to grave to activate Vast from deck because it turns on Watch's monster search effect. Watch is great because it sets up perfectly for Brother, PD or Banger. The Sprigguns traps are underwhelming and kind of trash, except for Sprigguns Blast. but they are useful because they can be searched with banger. Calls is straight up trash. I don't suggest running it, but if you do, it's slow and it doesn't do much unless you're summoning Captain Sagas. So fair warning if you decide to actually run that card, but I can understand if you don't have space for anything else or you can't afford anything else. If you can't, then it's perfectly acceptable, but just realize that it's kind of trash. The issue with Call is that it lacks synergy with Vast Desert. You cannot special summon the Exist monsters special summoned by Vast Desert because it was not special summoned properly. By that I mean that you cannot special summon the Exist monsters because you did not hard make them, in that you did not Exist summon them utilizing normal Exist methods. So you did not use 2 level 4s and so on and so forth because you utilized Vast Desert to summon them. It is better to utilize those monsters that you that are in grave because that was summoned from Vast Desert, such as Merrymaker, which you'll usually summon, to facilitate Banger's effect by banishing them, because it's literally a free banish because you can't really use that monster again, kind of, unless you try to send it back to the extra deck with Rocky. Blast is a good card. While the effect to not utilize a monster zone is not that powerful, the second effect to negate the monster is good because it does not target the monster but rather the zone. So this can be utilized in certain situations where a monster is untargetable but it can still be negated. So for instance, Red Eyes Dragoon cannot be targeted but it can still be negated. Therefore you can utilize Banger Blast in such a way that you target the monster zone it is on, and that will effectively stop the monster's effect. Now it is important to notice that I haven't discussed the Fallen of Albez effects, and that's because they're not really that useful unless you decide to run an Albez variant to Sprigguns, and that is kind of useful because you can utilize calls to summon Albez to have a pseudo super poly. But other than that, you're not going to really be running the Albez engine because there are other engines that you can run that are kind of better, and also the Albez-esque effects are also kind of iffy. Consider calls for a second. Calls requires you to banish it, and it requires you to banish a fusion monster from grave. It's extremely slow and it's meant to be utilized with Merrymaker's second effect to send a fusion monster that lists Albaz to the grave. It's slow and it's kind of tedious, and a lot of the times you won't have the extra deck space for it, so you probably won't even run it. So that's it for the spell and traps. We're now going to move on to the combos or strategies or so on and so forth, or more primarily the techs. That's the section that we're going to move on to now. Techs and engines are utilized to facilitate plays and to supplement valuable aspects for an archetype. For instance, consider the engine of Invoked. The Invoked engine is a genetic engine that allows a player to have access to a handful of powerful fusions for various aspects of the game: Makeable for negate and Purgatrio for a board wipe. Engines can be either generic and have no synergy with the deck, or they can be deck specific. A generic engine would be the previous Needle Fiber package before O-Lion was banned. That engine could tap into boards that Needle Fiber allowed, such as Herald of Arclight and Boroload Savage Dragon, for almost any deck. It was not deck specific. Deck specific engines are engines that have synergy with the deck. In this regard, you can think of the Scrap engine in August. While Scraps are somewhat generic, they have inherent synergy with the Orcus archetype as they interact with Machine decks. Sprigguns are somewhat limited, but they have a few engines and techs that they can run to have an edge in a duel. Let's first think of what Sprigguns are though. They're fire machine monsters, but most of their monsters have less than 500 attack, with the only exception being Captain Sargus and Rocky. With this in mind, one could run machine duplication to summon 2 extra level 4s, allowing for either a link or exist plays, or you can utilize machine duplication on Banger and hard summon Exploder to pop the opponent's field. Other techs include generic rank 4s such as Abyss Dweller and Exiton Knight, but another important consideration for any Sprigguns player should be Gear Giant X. Gear Giant searches any of the level 4s, and you can utilize Gear Giant with Sprigguns brothers to allow brothers to special summon a Spriggans from grave by searching it off of Gear Giant and then discarding it off of the field spell Vast Desert Golgonda. There are 3 engines that can be utilized with the Spriggans deck, and that is the Dogmatica engine, the Fallen of Albus engine, and the Scrap engine. The Dogmatica engine revolves around utilizing Dogmatica cards such as Maximus and Nadir Servant to either act as a pop or utilize them to facilitate plays with the Fallen of Albus cards. For instance, you can utilize Maximus to send both Ash Dragon and Steel Express Dragon to garner huge card advantage, as it would allow you to search for a Dogmatica card at the end phase, which would usually be Dogmatica Knighted, so that you have further interruption on your opponent's turn, as Knighted allows you to special summon itself and negate a monster on board. And the Steel Express Dragon can be utilized with Captain Sargus by special summoning Captain Sargus at the end of your turn, so that you can utilize Captain Sargus' effect on your opponent's turn. The Dogmatica engine also allows you to access Dogmatica Punishment and a handful of extra deck monsters that synergize with the Dogmatica package, namely Elder Entity Nithis and Cyphrane Omega, amongst many others. There are, however, a few things to note. First, be wary of utilizing Punishment. Punishment stops you from special summoning from the extra deck until the end of the next turn. So if you do use it during your opponent's turn, you cannot summon a Sprigguns Xyz on your turn from the extra deck. Secondly, you should be extremely cautious utilizing Maximus effect in a meta where Dogmatica is favored or top tier, because in these scenarios your opponent will either side or main deck extra deck monsters specifically designed to be sent by your Maximus play. They will more than likely send Nithis for a pop, Omega to bounce a card from your graveyard on their turn or from their graveyard on their turn, and they will always send Cyber Dragon Nova as the second or first card, and this is simply to summon Invoke the Mechaba. So always be cautious when using this engine, because it doesn't have a lot of counterplay, but it has, when this deck is in the format, it warps the meta to play certain cards in the extra deck that can really hinder you, so be cautious. The Fallen of Albus engine is one more geared towards disrupting your opponent through fusion summoning on their turn, utilizing both Fallen of Albus, which allows you to utilize one of your opponent's monsters as fusion material, and Super Poly. The Fallen of Albus engine has synergy as an interruption heavy deck, primarily because you can finally utilize Spriggan's Call and the second effect of Spriggan's Blast, and that's the effect to target 2 monster zone, allowing you for 2 monster negates and disallowing your opponent from special summoning or normal summoning to 2 zones, which is kind of powerful. Now the final part of actually being able to use Spriggan's Call is one of the more worthwhile things of this deck, and it actually affords you the ability to run Spriggan's Call without questioning your life. There are a ton of monsters that Albus can summon, so utilizing Albus is not really a negative. There are tons of cards that he can work with, so it's not really a matter of if you can special summon a Fallen of Albus fusion monster on your opponent's turn, but rather a question of when do you want to. However, the fusion with the most synergy with Spriggan would be Splin the Steel Express Dragon. While its ability to pop all monsters in a column it moves to on your turn is good, the greatest benefit is the ability to special summon a Spriggan from deck during the end phase or search during the end phase, which will primarily be utilized to summon Captain Sargus on the first turn, because it will allow you to utilize Captain Sargus on your enemy's turn, which is a free pop. The third engine one can utilize is the Scrap engine. The Scrap engine is by far the most consistent, especially with Scrap Raptor probably releasing in Lightning Overdrive. This engine is the most consistent because Scrap's Recycler, which is the main playmaker, is extremely searchable through a myriad of means. You can utilize Scrap Raptor when it's released to pop itself and search recycler, and Raptor will allow you another normal summon of a scrap monster, and you can normal summon the recycler. Or you can utilize the machiner package to search recycler, and if you're running scrap Raptor, you can utilize myriad of dino search cards like fossil excavation to search scrap Raptor. So there are like multiple ways to search the cards that are necessary to make plays. Either way, you'll almost always have a means to get scrap recycler on field, as you have a myriad of means to search it, and you have a myriad of means to search the searches. The primary issue with the scrap engine is that it requires quite a bit of space in the main deck and in the extra deck, and it is also bricky. While you can obviously do cool plays with Curious the Lightsworn Dominion to further facilitate plays, or the lip package if you desire, it is not exactly meta because it almost loses to any negation. The scrap engine is extremely fragile. It is a good engine if your opponent has nothing, but in this day and age everybody runs hand traps, and you should too, so it's not really that good. However, it's consistent, and if you're looking for consistency, then it's a good engine to run. Just be wary of what I just warned. The Fallen of Albus engine is not as good as the Dogmatica engine. It's iffy and it requires quite a bit to be useful. Utilize the Dogmatica engine if you want to use Sprigguns as a rogue strategy in the meta. And finally, utilize the Scrap engine if you're looking for a combo variant for Sprigguns. Come to the main question that this video is leading to. Are Sprigguns good or not? Now, the question of whether Sprigguns are good or not depends upon how you play this game or what you intend to do with Sprigguns. If you intend to use Sprigguns in a casual setting, of course they're going to be good. They're not terrible. They have few combos and there are a few tricks you can run. But if you're trying to use Sprigguns in a competitive environment, say even a locals or a regionals or a YCS, I would recommend that you reconsider. Because Sprigguns right now, while they have gotten some really good support with Merrymaker, with Booty and so on and so forth, they still lack something, and I can't really put my hand on it. I think they lack more Xyz monsters. They lack something that really puts them over the top. Sure, you can utilize a lot of engines. You can utilize the Dogmatica engine as I explained before, and you can utilize the Fallen of Albus engine as interruption, and sure, it will be good, but the true thing about the Sprigguns deck is that it's just kind of lackluster right now. Sure, they have a lot of good cards. They have Watch, which is amazing. It's a searcher and a dumper, and if Sprigguns ever become meta, that card will be limited, but right now they're not there. They're a fun deck. Their artwork is amazing and I enjoy playing them personally, but I do not recommend them for competitive environment. So are they good or not? I'd say they're good, but they're not great, and that is enough not to put them in the meta scene. Are they bad? No, they're not terrible. They're not Bergtile levels of trash, but they're compatible enough for the current age of Yu-Gi-Oh!